Our story is called The Lady of the Rock, and it takes place in the year 1527. Now, the Duke of Argyll, he was a rather young man when he came into his lands, and he was known to have a fiery temper. But he was not a bad man, and actually he was rich not only in lands, but in friends. And he is actually not the focus of our story. Rather, his baby sister, the Lady Elizabeth, is. You see, with the early death of his parents, it was the Duke of Argyll who raised his sister from the time that she was just a wee lass. And he raised her, and he guided her, and he watched her blossom into a bonny young woman. And when she came of age, he threw her a grand cotillion, inviting all of the local young lairds from the lands and the isles thereabout. And of all of those suitors, there was one who stood above the pack, Highland MacLean, the young laird of the Isle of Duart. Now, you see, he was a sort of man that when he set his sights on something, he went straight for it. And so he was able to get past all the other suitors. And so he wooed, and he won the hand of the young Lady Elizabeth. And they were wed in a grand ceremony in the castle of Argyll. And he took her back to his Isle of Duart. And there she got to know the people of that isle, and they her. Now, she was not just easy on the eyes, she was easy on the ears as well, for she was the sort of person that always had a kind word for everyone. And so soon she was greatly beloved of the people of the Isle of Duart. And so there they lived, happily ever after, the end. Actually, no. Oh, it would have been fine for them if it had worked out like that, but then we wouldn't have much of a story to tell, now would we? No. You see, Highland MacLean, he was a sort of man who enjoyed the hunt more than the feast. That is, he enjoyed the pursuit of something, but once he'd got it, he felt that he could have got something better and was never satisfied with what he had. And the same went for his young bride. Sure, she was a bonny lass, but other lasses were bonnier, and though she came with quite a respectable dowry from her brother the Duke, surely other dowries were greater. And so there wasn't a day that went by that Highland MacLean didn't let her know that he was not satisfied with her and that she'd been quite the disappointment. This was a hard thing for a young bride to hear from the very man she called husband. And so she grew very lonely and sad, locked away in that castle. But what could she do? She was a married woman. What could MacLean do? He wondered. Now he thought maybe he could just give his wife back to her brother the Duke of Argyll, but he had heard stories of this man's temper, and he didn't want to be facing that. Also, for sure, he'd have to be given back the dowry, and he couldn't be parting with that. Also, that would give him quite the reputation and would surely interfere with his wooing. So what could he do now? A widower would get to keep the dowry, and after a respectable period of mourning, be allowed to go a-wooing again. And so that was his plan. Between the Isle of Duart and the land of Argyll, in the water, there was this rock, and the rock stood well out of the water at low tide. But at high tide, the waves came crashing up, and the rock was submerged. And this was his plan. So, that morning, he came to his wife in all contrition, speaking softly. "Oh, my poor wife, I fear I've not been the husband I should have been, and I've been speaking to you far too cruelly. Please, accept my apologies. Let us spend some quality time together, just the two of us, and let's make a fresh start, shall we?" Oh, Elizabeth had not heard him talk like this since the days when they were first married, and it did her heart good to hear his tone again. She said, "Aye, my husband, I like that very much." She said, "I've got just the thing. Let's have a picnic out on the rock. It'll be just the two of us." "That sounds so romantic," she said. "Thank you." And so she went to the servants to have the picnic basket prepared, and he went and had the rowboat prepared. And then, when everything was ready, they got in the rowboat, and he rowed out to the rock, all the while smiling at his bonny wife. And they came to the rock, and then he helped his wife up onto the rock, and he handed her the picnic basket. And just as she thought he was about to tie off the boat, he sat back down and he started to row away. And she said, "Husband, where are you going?" And he said, "To find me another wife. Farewell." And he kept rowing. And she thought, surely this is some kind of jest. He doesn't just mean to leave me here. But as the sight of him got smaller and smaller, disappearing into the distance, she realized that this had been his plan all along. And she sat down on the rock and just took it in. And there she waited and waited and waited. Minutes turned to hours. The sun sank lower toward the horizon, and the waters crashed up against the rocks, higher and higher, reaching her feet. And she realized the end was drawing near, and so she prayed, asking for forgiveness for any wrong she had ever done to any living soul. But being that she was such a kind soul herself, that was a short list. And so she prayed that the end come swiftly. And then she heard voices. A fishing boat in the distance, just near enough to hear her, she cried, "Ahoy! Ahoy there! Hey! Help! Over here!" Well, the fishing boat, they heard her cries, and they came to her, and they said, "What are you doing out here?" And they brought her onto their boat, and being fishermen men of Argyle themselves, they recognized her right away, and they said, "Lady Elizabeth, what are you doing out here alone on this rock?" And she said, "My husband left me there." They said, "Now why would he be doing a thing like that?" Oh. She said, "Please, don't take me back to Duart. Take me to my brother's castle in Argyle. Only there will I be safe." And so they tacked their sails and they headed back to Argyle, to her brother's castle. And now remember, this was still the middle of the night. The sun had not yet risen. And so the Duke of Argyle was roused from his slumber and brought still in his nightshirt. And he said, "What is going on here? What are you doing at my castle, and why are your clothes all soaking wet? What is going on?" And so she told him the story of how her husband had been acting and casting his eye about to other ladies, and how he had left her there on the rock. Now I told you, the Duke of Argyle, he had a fiery temper. And so he was ready to strap on his sword and sail for Duart right then and there. But fortunately, the Lady Elizabeth, she prevailed upon him to calm down. And she said, "Brother, if you attack Duart, the good people of Duart will be obliged to defend their laird, and their laird will meanwhile just get away scot-free. We don't want to be doing that. Please be guided by me." And he said, "Well, what would you have me do then?" She said, "Brother, I've had a wee bit of time to think about this. Trust me, I have a plan. And so she set to writing, and the Duke wrote a letter to his brother-in-law. Dear brother-in-law, I do so miss my sister. You know how very close we are. Please, won't you soon come for a visit, that we might keep each other's company again? It would do my heart good to see you both. And he sent this off to do it, and it reached Lachlan MacLean, and MacLean read it, and so he wrote back, "Oh, my dear brother, it is with a heavy heart that I tell you the sad news. Your dear sister has been overtaken with a fever. We hoped and prayed that she would recover, but I'm afraid, as is so often the way with these fevers, she quickly passed from this world." And he sent this off to Argyll. Now the Duke of Argyll had anticipated such an answer, and he said, "Oh, my dear brother-in-law, I am sore grieved to hear this. I insist that you bring my sister's body back to Argyll, that she might be buried proper in the family plot of the churchyard." And they sent this off, and MacLean got it. Bring the body back. He had a coffin fashioned, and inside that coffin he placed a combination of straw and stones and pitch about the size and weight of the Lady Elizabeth, and he shut the lid, and he had the lid nailed down good and tight, and that is what he brought back to the land of Argyll in his sailing ship. Oh, he made a great show of being the craving husband. Oh, yes, with many tears he cried and said, "Oh, my poor dear wife. She was too good for this world. We'll not see another one of her like any time soon." And the Duke of Argyll, he too made a great show of grief, saying, "Oh, my poor dear baby sister, whom I raised from just a wee lass. Let's open the lid of this coffin, that I might gaze upon her sweet face one last time." "No," said MacLean, the fever really took its toll. The poor thing couldn't eat, couldn't keep anything down. She lost so much weight, her cheeks were so gaunt. No, you want to remember her in the prime, with the flush in her face and the sparkle in her bright blue eyes. You don't want to be remembering her like this." "You're a good man," said the Duke of Argyll. "Please, we've prepared a funeral feast in my sister's honour. Won't you please come join us at the banquet?" Never one to turn down a banquet. Well, Lachlan MacLean was all over that. And so the doors to the great banquet hall were open, and the smells wafted to his nostrils. Oh, they laid out a fine feast with ducks and geese and all these fine foods, and his mouth watered and his stomach grumbled, and there at the head of the table sat his beautiful sister, the Lady Elizabeth, fine and healthy, and standing behind her were all the chieftains of the clans of Argyll, staring daggers at Lachlan MacLean. MacLean withdrew his sword and slowly backed out of the room, and the chieftains put their hands to their own hilts, ready to cut him down. But the Duke of Argyll said, "Oh no, no man here should sully his blade with the blood of this scalawag. Oh, and if you're thinking of going back to do it, I've already sent messengers, and your people already know." And so MacLean backed away with his sword, and he got in his rowboat, and he started rowing out to his sailing ship. And when he reached his ship, there were his men, standing ready, hands on the hilts of their swords. This was no way out for him. And so Lachlan Kitana MacLean, well, there was nothing to do but just keep rowing. And they watched as he rowed out of sight. Now, whatever became of Lachlan Kitana MacLean, with his reputation, he couldn't be using his name again. He'd lost his lands. He had nothing but the coins in his purse, the clothes on his back, and the sword in his hilt. Now perhaps he was simply lost at sea, or perhaps he took to shepherding or became a mercenary. Nobody really knows. And frankly, nobody cares. For this man got his. And let that be your lesson in being greedy and cruel and always wanting to have more. The man lost it all. And that is the story of the Lady of the Rock.